So now you have a lot of people with emotional underdevelopment communicating impulsively on social media. And so people will say horrible things on social media that might never even say in real person to anybody. So there's a lot of disconnect in society. People literally don't know their neighbors. Neighborhoods are no longer neighborhoods, which means there's a deep hunger for connection, and the social media provides a simulacrum of connection. So what do people have on social media? They have friends. They like each other. But the friends aren't real friends, because real friends know you, and you're not afraid to show them who you are. So the less it meets your real needs, the more addictive it is, because the more and more what you need to get. You can use social media responsibly just as you can exercise responsibly, or you can exercise addictively, or you can use social media addictively. So it's their internal relationship to them, these activities, that defines whether they're addictive or not. Now, if you're using something for temporary relief or pain relief or pleasure, and you crave it, despite negative consequences, you got an addiction. Whereas if you're using social media not to escape emotional distress, not because you're craving it, but simply because it's a useful modality, and you don't suffer negative consequences, then it's not an addiction. So it's not the external behavior. I mean, you can drink alcohol not addictively. You can have sex non addictively. You can go shopping non addictively. Or you can engage in all those activities in a purely compulsive, addictive fashion, depending on what the internal dynamic is. Does it provide temporary pleasure, pain relief? Do you crave it? And do you continue with it despite negative consequences? That's what tells you whether it's an addiction or not. Now, broadly speaking, social media are highly addictive, and a lot of people are addicted, and it having a devastating effect on their lives. If you define addiction as I do, as any behavior that a person craves, finds temporary pleasure or relief in, suffers negative consequences, and cannot give up despite negative consequences, that's an addiction. Again, I don't care whether it's sex, gambling, ideology, or cocaine. And the brain circuits are the same. The same brain circuits are involved in all the addictions. So we think there's all these different addictions. If you actually look at the addicted brain, it's the same brain circuit that's involved in all addictions. So an ideology that allows you free expression of your impulses. You go get to hit somebody if you're angry. You get to throw a rock through somebody's window, or a verbal bomb to their personal sense of self. If you're lacking a sense of personal power, but the ideology gives you a pseudo-empowerment, now you belong to something really important. If there's no meaning in your life, an ideology gives you a pseudo-meaning. If you're lacking genuine pleasure in your life, and you get the pseudo-pleasure of connecting with people who see things the same way, an ideology can function like an addiction. And furthermore, it invites denial, just like addiction always invites denial. When I was in my addicted behavior, which I have been, I was in total denial that I was an addict. To me, it was just a natural thing to do. It doesn't matter what the cost was to the people around me. Ideologies can do the same thing. You're in total denial about the impact on yourself or on others. So yeah, ideology can function like an addiction. There's an American psychologist who had that human beings are all creatures with special needs. And I think one of our special needs is for meaning. Our lives are not meant to be just lived for the daily sake of physical existence. Now, that meaning in a tribal setting is automatically provided for you, because you're bigger than yourself, and you belong to something greater than yourself. And when you're connected with nature, or you're connected with some spiritual practice or belief, you have some meaning that transcends your daily struggles for survival. Now, this society has pretty much reduced that. Like we talk about meaning a lot, and we talk about broad values such as freedom and democracy and so on, but that's not what people experience in their daily lives. Nobody experiences democracy in their daily lives. Mostly people work in institutions where they're told what to do, and they have no voice in the matter whatsoever. And the freedom is very often reduced to making choices between meaningless alternatives. And there's more and more disconnection, as we've already mentioned. So there's a deep lack of meaning in people's lives. The addictions can certainly come along and provide a false, temporary, but momentarily satisfactory sense of meaning. And meaning is important to all of us. We all want to feel there's something more significant about our lives than simply the fact that we have dinner in the evening and we defecate in the morning. First of all, what's the case in this society is that people are less and less connected. Human beings were not meant to live in these, from the evolutionary point of view, we're not designed to live in these complex, vast aggregations. We're meant to live in small hunter-gatherer bands where everybody knows everybody else, and there's deep connection between people. And that's how we've lived, for the most part, for millions of years, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of years of evolution, until really quite recently. So there's a lot of disconnect in this society. People literally don't know their neighbors. Neighborhoods are no longer neighborhoods. They're isolated domiciles for the most part, which means there's a deep hunger for connection, and the social media provides a simulacrum of connection, the pretense of connection. And so what do people have on social media? They have friends. They like each other. These are attachment dynamics. These are connection dynamics. But the friends aren't real friends, because real friends know you, and you're not afraid to show them who you are. On social media, people have concocted an artificially adorned persona, and it's these artificial entities that then people like. So the individual never gets the sense of being really liked, because they know that it's just their image that's being liked. And the so-called friends are not there for you when you need them, and yet use the same language. Liking and friends are very strong language, but social media is a pale copy of them. So the less it meets your real needs, the more addictive it is, because the more and more what you need to get. Number one. Number two, I'm not sure that it's caused, but it's certainly revealed the many subcultures in this society, and allows people who belong to various ideological groupings to identify one another and to band together and to have sort of a pseudo camaraderie. So we can all hate the same thing. We can all be hostile to the same people. And anybody can express an opinion. In the old days of letters to the newspapers, people had to be pretty responsible for what they wrote. They had to identify themselves. Social media, you can say anything you want about anybody. Doesn't matter how hurtful, how wrong, how hateful really, and not even identify yourself. So it allows people who otherwise are on the margins of society to aggregate in these pseudo groups that then promote one another's most negative tendencies. And there's no guidance there, there's no leadership, there's nobody to call you to your senses, there's nobody to say, really, do you really mean that? Is that what you really intend? What's really going on? So there's peer groupings without any kind of guidance. It's really like a teenage gang phenomenon where people band together mostly for negative reasons. They're lacking contact, so they need to band together, so that's legitimate. But they band together without mentorship, without tradition, without adult guidance, and so we see what we see. Well, you see, as you and I are speaking to each other, Ali, we're tracking each other's face. And our ear muscles are actually adjusting themselves automatically to hear not just what's being said, but also the tone of voice in which it's being said. And you will nod when I say something, or I might nod or smile when you say something. So communication is as much about these nonverbal cues, which are mediated through our nervous system, as it is about the verbal content. Now, none of that exists on social media. It's not genuine communication. Human communication is almost meant to be face-to-face. And even if I were to write a letter to somebody that I was going to mail, that's a much more conscious and deliberate process than dashing something off on social media and pushing the send button in a state of tizzy, so that it's much less impulsive. So social media really takes away the nuts and bolts of human communication and provides only the surface manifestation of it. So what masquerades as communication is really diatribes very often. And I know what it's like, because I get an email, which might trigger me, and then right away I want to write it out and then push the send button. And boy, have I had to learn not to do that, because there's no reflection there. It's just whatever emotion arises, you express it and then you communicate it right away without any reflection. If I'm talking to somebody, as long as we're connected, by and large, I'm going to reflect on what I say before I say it. By and large, I'm going to be modulated by the fact that I'm talking to a real human being. And as I point in my book, what the addicts lack very often is emotional self-regulation. The parts of the brain that regulate our emotions, including the orbital cortex, just don't develop in addicted people because the conditions for development are adequate. So the brain does develop in interaction with the environment. So now you have a lot of people with brains that are not fully developed. They might be intellectually developed, but the emotional circuits aren't. So now you have a lot of people with emotional underdevelopment communicating impulsively on social media. And that's what we're seeing. And so people will say horrible things on social media that might never even say in real person to anyone.